The Agenda this week investigated how experts use profiling to track serial killers and heard about the health benefits of a good night's sleep. The Agenda's Week in Review begins debating democracy in the digital era. People are today saying it's not the Republican Party anymore, it's the Trump Party. People in Ontario are now saying it's not necessarily the PC Party, it's the Ford Party. Or, it's not the Liberal Party of David Peterson and Stuart Smith, it's the Win Party. Do you think there's been that kind of sea change in the way that we regard our political parties now?
Yeah, I really do. I mean, there are some things that simply don't change about politics, and one of the most powerful forces in politics is when people decide it's time for a change. And that seems to be what's going on in Ontario, and it doesn't seem to matter who is leading the Ontario PC Party if the voters have decided that it's time for a change. But the other thing that's going on is kind of what you put your finger on there, is that I'm old enough to remember when people were saying how television, the advent of television, was putting a focus on leaders at the expense of the party. Well, today, in the Twitter age, the Snapchat age, that's even more the case than it ever was, where the entire focus of the population in the United States is what is Donald Trump going to tweet today. Now, that's all very well, when you're an opposition party and you're trying to bring down a government, but what concerns me the most is how this change in the use of technology and the impact on the electorate and the impact on parties is not compatible with the complexity of government. I mean, it is compatible with winning an election, which is what the strategists are thinking about. That's their job, is to win an election. But at the end of the day, you've got to run a healthcare system and an education system and a transportation system. And what I fear the most, Steve, is that people elected to office will just be less ready for that job than ever.
Peter.
Here's a very deeply anti-democratic notion, but the problems that you're describing, the antidote to those problems are stronger political parties. Not political parties stronger in the sense that they've got more members, but political parties that are stronger in the sense that they have traditions about what they believe. They may have competing factions within them. They have powerful members who are elected to parliaments, and those members have influence over who's selected. And those members and that party as a corporate entity carries forward an ideology that can change over time, but isn't merely at the whim of the leader. I mean, we think that parties are a bad thing, but that party you're describing, that ruled Ontario for 42 years, is one which evolved over time in reaction to the leaders, but those leaders had to reconcile themselves to those parties. That described the Liberal Party for a long time in Canada, where it had a core set of beliefs, and leaders had to reconcile themselves to at least some of those beliefs or some of those political commitments or ideology or whatever you want to call them. The solution here to this sort of thing is not less powerful parties. It's parties that are actually able to keep out outsiders who come in and hijack them, and instead ask people to be leaders of a party that has certain beliefs.
But the rule, Susan, I'm going to get you to weigh in on this. The rules now permit, quote unquote, the hijacking of parties by single issue interest groups now, because it's one person, one vote, and you can take over a party. That's the way it goes now.
Yeah, I'm surprised we haven't been talking. We should talk about party financing in all of this too. That is it's not just people you have to mobilize; it's money. Again, I think we were better off in the days of the public subsidy for the parties, because basically politicians are turned into fundraising machines. They're out there. We have done away with corporate donations and union donations and large-scale donations. Often those donors gave the party the stability you're talking about. You notice no political party in Ottawa now wants to be aligned with big business or Bay Street, or wants to be a friend of the corporate world, because they don't need their donations anymore. And I think that makes things a little more volatile as well, that parties are moving now where the money is, and it's lots of individual donations, and it's an erratic kind of system.
I think this comes back also a very important point Graham said about governing, because ultimately the point here is political competition, who's going to govern. And these small donations that Susan talks about, that you're appealing usually to the extremes of parties. Again, you're appealing through emotion. You're trying to get the person's going to get really riled by this or that. But once you get in government, you're trying to build bridges. You're trying to build consensus in some ways to move forward. So the system is working at cross purposes. Parties used to play the role of brokering differences. Now that's not really their role anymore. Now they're just vessels for collecting money, putting out messages and advertising, getting a brand, and sometimes that brand could be a Donald Trump, a Justin Trudeau, a Doug Ford, a pre-existing brand actually helps the party, gives it a head start.
Let's get Jim Clemente into this discussion now. Do we know enough about the realm of profiling or criminal investigative analysis that would enable authorities to actually understand who has the potential of doing this and actually interrupt so-called serial killing before it becomes serial killing? What do you think, Jim?
Well, although we know a lot about the profile of serial killers, there's a spectrum of people on that continuum, basically. They differ in many ways, but the one similar construct is that they will kill 2 or more or 3 or more people in different events and basically not have any individualized motive for those crimes. The thing about it, though, is that people have free will. And although they could have all the markers, all the telltale signs, they may not ever act out on it. So it's a difficult thing to actually predict human behavior. The only true indicator of future human behavior is a past pattern of that behavior.
Tim, what would you add to that in terms of helping us understand what the commonalities are of serial killers?
One of the things I would bring into play is the cross-jurisdictional boundaries that makes it so difficult for law enforcement, and it makes it so much easier for these perpetrators. Whether you're committing murders, like in the DC sniper case where you're driving around and shooting people, or doing much closer bloodletting of criminal or of victims, the criminal that's doing that generally does it in multiple jurisdictions. And that makes it very difficult for different jurisdictions to realize what other jurisdictions may have happening in their areas. And so these individuals are therefore able to get away with it for a longer period of time because, as Michael said, the data is there, but it's not necessarily known by different jurisdictions, and it's not necessarily recognized as a serial crime or a relation between criminal behaviors because they don't see it happening in their backyard. It's happening in somebody else's backyard, and it's just not noticed because so many departments are so busy with their own crime, they can't look outside their boundaries to see what else might be happening that could be related.
Michael, at the risk of getting too graphic here, is there something about the way a serial killer disposes of the bodies that he or she kills that tells us something about who did it?
Very much so, and the FBI for decades has been collecting data on this, and there's 4 recognized what we call disposal pathways or methods by which the offender disposes of their victim afterwards. So, I mean, Jim talked about sort of the spectrum of offenders. This is the most effective way of delineating a suspect profile based on what was done with the victim, in that we have very consistent markers associated with each of these pathways. So pathway number 1 would involve transporting and concealing a victim, or otherwise burying or even dissolving or dismembering, obliterating the evidence, if you will, or ensuring that they're never found. Alleged serial killer Bruce McArthur, if in fact this is correct, so these allegations are proven true, would fit pathway number 1, and he would be, the average age for pathway number 1 is 24 to 43. So he's significantly older than the dozens of offenders who have used this method previously and who are on file. But he does fit the profile in a number of other ways. What's interesting is 100% of offenders who, on record, who use this method are employed full-time and are Caucasian. Again, 43 is the upper end of the age range, but we know for a number of reasons that, again, alleged killer McArthur is anomalous in a number of ways. And I'm going to suggest, and I've been stressing this publicly, that the sophistication and the organization seen in his disposal method and the brazenness, quite frankly, suggests that he's been at this for some time. So at one point in time, he was probably in that optimal age range of 24 to 43. And that's why I'm suggesting police need to start looking back 20, 30 years at where he was and then start cross-referencing cases.
When you don't get enough sleep, one of the functions of sleep is to use cerebral spinal fluid to come in and clear out the interstitial tissues of your brain of this plaque. It's called beta amyloid, and it's been associated with Alzheimer's. So it could be that evolution, by whittling away our total sleep times, made us more vulnerable to this. Because remember, evolution doesn't care what you do after you've reproduced. So in old age, it doesn't care if you have cognitive decline, because you've already contributed your genes to the gene pool.
John, we are at the time of year when we spring forward as opposed to fall back. And I want you to talk to us about, well, I heard about this. 70,000 people in Finland apparently signed a petition, and MPs agreed to lobby the European Union to do away with daylight savings time, because they thought it messed up our circadian rhythms and all of that kind of thing and just made us less well functioning. How much of an impact does Spring Forward have on our typical sleep patterns?
So we, as I alluded to before, we were very aware that even a subtle change in the amount of sleep that you have each night has an impact on your behavior. I'll give your listeners a very good example. There was a beautiful study in which they took two groups of people. One, they gave the rhinovirus, and they didn't let them sleep as much as they normally would. The rhinovirus is the virus that causes the common cold. The other group, they let them have a normal night of sleep. And what they found is that you're 3 times more likely to develop the cold after you've been inoculated with the virus when you had less sleep.
Talk to us about the connection between a good night's sleep and light.
Light is critical. One of the things I actually do, since I've been reading this literature, one of the things I like to do is as soon as the sun goes down, I'll turn off as many lights as possible in the house. And this is supposed to help promote melatonin production. Melatonin is the principal hormone that regulates sleep-wake activity. Another thing I do, particularly since a pastime of mine is video gaming, and video gamers are one of the worst sleeping segments of our society, is I'll throw on, here I got a prop, I was told to bring in a prop, so I'll throw in these blue wave light blocking glasses, and I'm not being paid by any company to plug these, but what they do is they block the blue wave light, and it allows for natural melatonin production to occur. Gamers are really at risk for this because they're hunched over in front of these LCD screens that are blasting blue wave light on them, and they're in these really competitive environments, right? So they're in socially competitive environments, their cortisol spiked, their entire neuroendocrine system is primed for performance, and then they turn the computer off and think they're gonna fall asleep, and it's just not gonna happen. Nope.
Those glasses look like any other glasses, and the lenses do too, but they're not.
They have a little bit of a yellow tinge to them, but they're blocking about 40% of the blue wave light in the room right now.
Okay. What's a better option here? Convincing people to give up using their devices in the evening to avoid all of the trouble that David just mentioned, or make devices that are less sleep disruptive?
You know, the ideal scenario is the former. It's to give up using these devices before you go to sleep, because David pointed it out very nicely. The light emitted from, you know, your phones and computers and tablets, they effectively wake up the brain. They trick it into thinking it's time to be awake when it's really time to sleep.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review for this Friday, March 16th, 2018. You can see all of those conversations in their entirety at tvo.org, on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, and on our Twitter feed. That's twitter.com/theagenda.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.